Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. I'm the Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace. Today is Friday, November 22nd, and it's day 77 since the attacks on the south of Israel by Hamas on October 7th. I have lots of updates today. I wanted to start just by sharing with you a story that I would encourage you to listen to. It's 7 minutes if you listen on NPR. It's about a prominent Russian-American journalist, Masha Gessen, who received a prestigious award over the weekend for political thought in a ceremony that almost didn't happen because of backlash he received over his recent writings about Israel and Gaza. Gessen is Jewish. His family lost loved ones during the Holocaust, and he was criticized for an essay he wrote for The New Yorker that was published earlier this month, in which he likened the Gaza Strip to the World War II era ghettos that Nazis developed to separate or segregate and control Jewish people in occupied Europe. In the essays, he argues that the Holocaust is not a singular event, and he talks about the commitment of Jewish people that the atrocities of such death and destruction should never happen again. And he quotes the human rights report that just came out from Human Rights Watch that talks about the way that food is being used as a weapon of war in Gaza. And he says, we have to prevent this from happening. So I would really encourage you to listen to that. I thought it was inspiring that he is being so courageous. And our goal at Churches for Middle East Peace is to stand up against ethnic cleansing, to prevent more deaths in Gaza, more Palestinian deaths, more Jewish deaths. The atrocities of October 7th towards the Jewish people are horrific. And the goal is to call for a ceasefire and to pursue nonviolent means for security and equality for all people. So I wanted to call that to your attention. The Security Council at the United Nations did vote today. The vote was different than what it was originally going to be. It was supposed to be about a temporary ceasefire in Gaza, a mechanism to allow for the transfer of more aid. The resolution did go to vote today. 13 voted in favor. The US and Russia abstained. Here's a quick summary. It demands that all parties facilitate and enable the immediate, safe, and unhindered delivery of humanitarian assistance at scale. So essentially, the resolution is about increasing humanitarian aid and creating the conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostility, but it does not actually call. It discarded a draft calling for the suspension of fighting. When I first heard that the US abstained, I thought this was actually really good news. And then when I listened to the details, the devil is in the details. So there was not a temporary humanitarian pause included in that resolution. Some other things to know about this. Today's day 77. I have some updates specifically from yesterday. Excuse me. The Israeli Defense Forces said that they have taken over the Shijaya neighborhood in Gaza City. They continue to be active on the ground in South Gaza and also in North Gaza. There is now an investigation into the 3 Israeli hostages who had escaped Hamas captivity and then were killed by Israeli Defense Forces. The soldier who shot the 3 confirmed that he did see them carrying a white flag, but he said he didn't have time to make sense of the situation. And other soldiers said that they fired in violation of a specific explicit order that said, and they communicated that they just didn't understand. So that came out in the news today. The U.S. Spokesperson at the UN said that there are serious and widespread concerns about the current draft, and that we should ensure any resolution helps and does not hurt the situation on the ground. That was from yesterday. Jordan's Foreign Minister Safadi warned on Thursday that if the UN Security Council failed to pass a resolution, it would indicate significant double standards. And the UAE Foreign Minister Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed met also with senior PLO officials in Abu Dhabi to discuss the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. As we've been talking about, the death toll is now at roughly 20,000 Palestinians killed. North Gaza has been left without a functional hospital because of a lack of fuel, staff, and supplies. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Israeli President Herzog, in a meeting with the president of the Senate of France, said it is possible today to provide 3 times the amount of humanitarian aid to Gaza if the UN would just stop complaining and start doing its job. So that quote has been running throughout the news. Benny Gantz, the cabinet minister in Israel, said he has no intention of stopping the fighting in Gaza until the hostages are returned and until we change the reality for Israeli citizens. The hostage release negotiations are a powerful bargaining chip in Yahya Sinwar's hands, not only against Israel, but also against Hamas's leadership abroad. So there continues to be conversations about negotiations related to a ceasefire. Hamas did reject an Israeli ceasefire offer, saying that they will only agree to terms if a truce is already in effect, the Wall Street Journal reported, citing Egyptian intelligence sources. This position, according to Hamas, is agreed upon by all Palestinian factions in Gaza. The Israeli offer was reportedly for 1 week of truce in exchange for 40 hostages, and the leadership of Palestinian prisoners in Israel told Hamas it supports their position that no deal should be made in Israel as long as the fighting in Gaza continues. I'm assuming the leadership of Palestinian prisoners in Israel, I don't really know who that's referring to. That's from Haaretz. In New York, Hillary Clinton met with a delegation of Israelis whose family members are held hostage in Gaza. According to sources at the meeting, it was held at Columbia University. Clinton said that instead of making the release of hostages his top priority, that Netanyahu was busy with politics and his personal survival. In Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces announced the names of an additional 3 soldiers who've been killed. The number of wounded soldiers is now just under 2,000. Shin Bet Internal Security Services said that they have thwarted multiple Iranian attempts to recruit and deploy Israeli citizens to carry out hostile missions. Israelis have been asked to perform various paid tasks, such as photographing objects, checking addresses, and more. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that Israel's close friends are worried its military campaign is putting at risk the country's long-term safety. We have been saying that if you cannot call for a ceasefire for Palestinians' best interests, do it for the sake of Israel. Rocket sirens have continued to sound both on Israel's north border with Lebanon and on the border with Gaza. It's not technically a border, but the southern border of Israel. We also know that 14 kibbutzim in the Upper Galilee Regional Council have been decided to be closed because of Hezbollah activities in South Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Forces has shown that there have been 116 incidents of nationalist crime by Jews against Palestinians in the West Bank. So that does include settler violence, but it is not only settler violence of Jewish nationalists, and that's IDF data. It comes from COGAT, the coordination offices there. In an interview with the Saudi-owned magazine, Israel's opposition leader, Yair Lapid, said that it is our duty towards future generations of Palestinians and Israelis alike to live side by side at peace, and that the two-state solution is not dead, but delayed significantly until we find ways to secure the safety of our people. So that is a conversation that is happening within Israel. I wanted to close by letting you know CMEP is going to be coming out with a statement today in solidarity with the Episcopal Church. They put out a statement today also about Ali Hospital, the Arab hospital in Gaza. We've heard a lot about this hospital. Earlier this week, the Israeli military forced the closure of the hospital. It's a ministry of the Episcopal Diocese of Jerusalem. On Wednesday, the World Health Organization and UN staff visited and determined that the hospital is no longer functioning. They described horrifying circumstances, patients dying slowly and in pain, crying for water and with no medical care. Throughout this conflict, Ali has endured multiple bombings, a lack of fuel, water, and medicine, and the most dire circumstances imaginable. At times, Ali has been the only functional hospital in North Gaza, serving as many patients as possible, with staff are equipped inadequately and have done their very best with such limited resources. The Episcopal Church condemns the repeated attacks on hospitals and the targeting of medical workers, just as we condemn all actions throughout this conflict that kill and wound innocent civilians, especially babies and children, the elderly, and other medically vulnerable people. And the statement goes on. It ends saying, we pray fervently for peace, for peacemakers, and we urge our leaders to do everything possible to advocate for a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and urgently needed humanitarian care. The Episcopal Church is a member of CMEP. It's one of our board denominations. Our statement is standing in solidarity with them, calling for a comprehensive ceasefire, the release of hostages, and immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza. Do join us. Tomorrow is the 23rd. We'll be streaming the service from Reverend Munther Itzhak in Bethlehem. You'll be able to find that on our social media. Many blessings to you as Christmas is just around the corner, and we'll talk more about that in the days ahead.